Hello and welcome to another episode of CRT Sound System. And we've got episode 76 and we're talking about some FM synth. Here, as always, with Reese. Reese, how are you?
I'm doing incredible. We've got the podcast started. It's honestly incredible. We managed to do it.
Yeah, it's a real feat of engineering and all that.
Just all of our setups fighting in a giant brawl, and Alistair being the most evil of all, as always. Who is our recording bot?
Exactly. Yeah, and we've got a guest, returning guest, Justice. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. So happy to be here again talking with you guys about just some of my favorite things on earth. Synthesizers, music, video games, man, all of it.
Excellent. So you heard from The Scheme, the track Into the Lair by Yuzo Koshiro. So that's a PC-88 game. So the general thrust of this episode is we're just talking about various different FM synths, and as if you've listened to Justice's previous episodes, he's quite an expert on the FM synth. So I really wanted to get him to come in and just sort of be our guru, because the two of us are like little babies when it comes to the actual technical knowledge of like the sound chips and stuff that we talk about.
Google Gaga 10,000% there, Tom.
And man, I love the technology. I love talking about it. It may be the least interesting thing about all the stuff here today, because man, you've got some very interesting games lined up, some great bangers of actual music to listen to. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I wanted to get a good spread of sort of what you can get from FM synth, and like between like Japanese PCs, Western PCs, consoles, and sort of whatever we could get. Like it is a wide breadth of different things you can do with an FM synth. So I suppose just for the basics, just as if you want to describe what FM synth is. To try not to be too technical, I suppose, about it, if you can avoid
Sure.
it.
I'll hold myself back, because man, there's just so much to get to that isn't that kind of stuff too. Man, where to even begin? Because at basic, FM synthesizer, most people are familiar with FM radio, right? And it actually is the same technology. I guess in general, you can take one, in this case, a sound, and modulate it with another sound, just as a general concept. Like, there's a lot of ways to do that. FM is one way to do that. And maybe the easiest way to describe it is, instead of a sound, imagine instead of one sound modulating another, start off by thinking that you just take one sound and you adjust its pitch up and down. Like enough to where you could hear it, where it just kind of wiggles back and forth. And then imagine you keep doing that faster and faster and faster until it doesn't even sound like it's wiggling anymore. It just sounds like it's turned into a whole new sound. And that's fundamentally what FM synthesizers do in a nutshell.
Yeah, because the fact that it is the same technology as like an FM radio has always been sort of baffling to me, because like I don't understand how you can broadcast a voice over FM radio or like a full song but you can't do that in an FM synth for some reason. Like, is there a specific, like, there obviously is a specific reason that you can do one but not the other, but is it
Well,
just
it's
down
of
to
course it's
the?
not quite that simple, right? So
Yeah.
with radio technology, we like to, the energy that goes out over the air is very high frequency. We do it that
Mm,
way so that you can use a very cheap antenna from very far away. Uh,
yeah.
and that's why they use FM technology to broadcast audio through the air. And you're just not doing it for the same reason when in an FM synthesizer. You're doing it
Okay.
to make interesting sounds, right?
Yeah.
So it's I guess it's not that you can't. I mean, an FM synthesizer can't really generate the very high frequency that's used to put stuff over the air. For I guess
Oh,
would be
okay.
the easiest way to answer that question.
So it's just down to the signal itself rather than.
I suppose you could design one, but there'd be no
Yeah.
point, right? You're just not using it for that
Yeah.
reason.
No, that
It's
makes
a
sense.
little,
Yeah.
just before this recording started, I was talking a little bit about how this is kind of a confluence of science and art, right? When you
Mm,
talk about doing things with music and doing things with
yeah.
music with technology, right? There's a science part to it and an art part to it, right? So,
Yeah.
it's one of the fun things about explaining to this is the phrase, but what does it sound like, right? And I feel like any words, with all the technology that's going into this, any words you're using to describe what does it sound like are very subjective words, right? They're not, they're not science words. They're not technology words. Some people would use the word farty to describe FM basses, for instance, right?
Yeah.
I would not. I hate
No, I
that.
love FM basses.
Yeah.
I think to me they kind of go hard, but
Yeah.
that's another example of very non-scientific language, right?
Yeah.
So my question is what separates FM synths from other video game music beat boops? Is it the signal being able to modify another signal?
That's probably the big superpower of it, but and in the specific way that it does. In more general terms, though, compared to especially what came before, well, because when you make music, there's kind of two parts to it. There's the part where you write notes, and then there's the part where you produce the music. You see what I mean?
Mm,
And I'd say that it's more of a on the production side of things. It expands your options a lot, which is also probably the biggest weakness of it because it's kind of confusing, actually. Also, there's so much you can do with it, especially compared to maybe something on the NES, that it's almost a bit overwhelming. In fact, also even compared to the Super NES, that synthesizer is also very capable in very different ways, but maybe a little more approachable compared to an FM synthesizer, since it works on
mm,
just kind of looping actual recordings, right?
yeah.
But
And
there's so
so
many things you can do with an FM synthesizer. It just really opens up the scape of how you can produce sound.
so when video game systems kind of left FM synth is because they were doing sample based or just playing the previously recorded music. That's correct?
Right. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Probably when you saw it fall off was maybe around the mid 90s and on where, like you said, you started to get CD-based systems. A lot of stuff was using Redbook audio and even like in the Saturn and the PlayStation, there was a lot that wasn't Redbook, but the
Mm,
sample-based synthesizers were so capable at that point and they're so much more approachable. And that does play into the quality, unfortunately, because what ends up happening with a lot of FM synth tracks is the people who write the music for it aren't necessarily experts at designing for the synthesizer. A lot of times they'll just use some baked in presets or libraries,
yeah. I
and
think
I
that's.
feel like today we're going to hear probably examples of both that
Yeah.
but also a lot of some of the more well designed stuff out there.
Yeah, I do think that some, like, probably from like some badly done Genesis and Mega Drive soundtracks more than anything else.
True.
That's sort of the it does get a bit of a reputation for,
Yeah,
like,
well, and you see what I mean, just there's such a width of variety there between good and
yeah,
bad. There's some very good, well done ones and some very poorly done ones.
yeah. Absolutely, and I mean, I think by and large, they're good, but like the bad stuff is the stuff that you do tend to run into. People sort of take that and are like, well, this is the sound of the Mega Drive. It's just farty synths and
Right, right.
chainsaw basses and
I gotta say, right off the top here, you've opened us up with the Scheme. The Scheme is such an interesting game in and of itself. It was an early
Mm,
Metroidvania. It's not a great game.
yeah,
The action in it's kind of mid, even for the time. The level design's terrible. Like stuff isn't for a game where you have to find power ups to explore new areas. Like the stuff isn't put anywhere in any sort of logical whatever. But man, those devs went on to make Ogre Battle, which is
yeah.
mind blowing. I just had to get that off my chest real quick. But also, the Scheme is also interesting here from a musical and an FM synth standpoint, because something very exciting had happened with Japanese PCs. With the PC-88 and the
Mhm.
PC-98, the FM
Mm,
Soundboard 2 had just been released. And that's number one. Number two, Yuzo Koshiro, the king, had
Yeah,
actually, this was, I think, his first project as a free agent after leaving Falcom.
I believe so. Yeah, yeah.
nice.
And man, he got a hold of this FM soundboard too, and he just wilded out with it. Man,
Yeah.
I think he wrote over 100 pieces of music for this game, and not even half of them were used.
Yeah,
He
there's
just
a
kept
whole
going.
folder on the on VGM rips of just stuff that wasn't used, and it's like 88 tracks.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, because he was just so in love with all the new stuff he could do with this brand new soundboard too.
yeah.
In defense of the Scheme a little bit, I feel like you get to an era of video game history where it's a little hard, the games become a little indefensible, just because they were still figuring out what a good video game was,
That's
and
fair.
Mm,
Yeah.
I feel like so many, anytime I watch a Basement Brothers video about something that came out for PC-88, there are like so many like separate elements, especially the music. So often, so in love with the PC uh, 88 sound chip. It's PC-88. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can kind of throw the 98 in there in a way.
Hmm.
Maybe not at this era, but they used the same hardware ultimately. The
Okay.
FM
yeah.
Soundboard 2 was not available for the PC-98 until several years later.
Okay.
They weren't making too many games for the 98 back then. It was more of a business machine.
Mm.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, because it was one
Uh,
of those things where like you could either get it as a sound module that you could upgrade, or like later versions came with it built in. Um,
Hmm.
but like it's all the same chip or the same sort of the same technology, just sort of different versions of that chip, as my
yeah,
understanding.
and there were
Yeah.
a lot fewer options for chips on the PC-88 compared to like DOS. There were really only
Yeah.
the two that I think that I'm aware of. There was the older Soundboard 1, and it had like three channels of FM and had three more channels of like very simple square wave generators, kind of like on the NES. Uh, the sound the, what the soundboard too. What was exciting about that, like first of all, more you have six channels of FM. You still have your three simpler channels, but you have nine total instruments you can use. So you can make pretty thicker arrangements. The other thing is you have the ability, that the soundboard one didn't have is the ability to use some recordings sounds too, some samples.
Oh,
So
okay.
in what you just heard, you probably heard some like I think there were like some orchestra hits in there. Like I said, Yuzo Koshiro was just wilding out with that thing.
Yeah. I would like to remind our listeners of the story of Yuzo Koshiro going to the arcade with a tape recorder to see to record like Street Fighter 2 and stuff, just to try to recreate it. Just really the Mozart of VGM. So
you
I
gotta
absolutely agree.
You also have to admire his youthful energy going in and just wilding out and playing with his toys and writing 100 freaking tracks.
Mm.
I think he might have been 20 years old at this time.
Yeah,
Hard to
like talk
say,
about
yeah.
somebody just like totally whose just life was music, just like eating, sleeping, drinking water, just probably annoyances that he had to get through so he could make yet another track for the scheme.
Right. I think he was writing music for the scheme the way I play Factorio.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like he's possibly the best to ever do it as far as like FM synth goes, and like he's more famous for stuff on like the Mega Drive, obviously, and even
Yeah.
stuff on the Super Nintendo, like the
Well,
Super Adventure
at least in
Island,
the
is
West,
it?
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like the stuff he
ActRaiser
did,
is like the first to prove that the one that shows you could actually use the SNES chip.
A funny story about the music to ActRaiser. It turns out he actually wrote that on a PC-88 with the
Yeah.
with that FM soundboard too,
yeah,
and then like handed it off to to somebody at Quintet to turn it into the Super Nintendo version of the
ported over.
soundtrack.
Yeah. I mean, to this day, my understanding is he still uses the PC-88 or the 98 tracker stuff to write a lot of his music, and then just ports it into more modern software. Then, like a lot of the Etrian Odyssey soundtracks will have like FM synth versions as like little bonus tracks on them, and he's put them up on his
Oh,
SoundCloud
lovely.
and stuff before.
Yeah, the newer ones too, right? Because the older Atrion Odysseys, they just straight up had FM soundtracks.
True. Yeah, they were just FM synth. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched a Basement Brothers video where he just put like a Yuzo Koshiro composed game into his CD player, and it had the soundtrack for the game and also the FM synth version of the ActRaiser soundtrack, just for no real reason other than Yuzo Koshiro had it and it ripped.
Yeah, that's like an alternate version of it as well, isn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I think I have that CD that I've found on SoulSeek or something.
Yes.
That has those versions on it. Yeah, I'll have to.
Well, I know what I'm doing when I get my computer here. Connecting to Four Push's SoulSeek and downloading another 300 gigabytes of music.
That's what it's for.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. All right. I guess we'll jump into the first block of tracks anyway. So these are all from PC-88 and 98 games. So I've 2 tracks from the scheme. I have 2 tracks from Brandish VT, which I believe is Brandish 4. Then I have 2 tracks from Touhou. Just to go back to the last episode. And I have a track then from Variable Geo, which is a fighting game. And then the last track is from Eye of the Beholder. So the first 2 by Yuzo Koshiro are Thousand Eyes and Master of the Shooting. Then next 2 are by Falcom Sound Team. Tracks are called The Prop and Hammer Slime. Then we have She's in a Temper from Touhou Fumaroku, The Story of Eastern Wonderland. And then Illusion of a Maid, Icemilk, Magic from Touhou Gensokyu, A Lotus Land Story. Then I don't know the artist for the Variable Geo track, unfortunately, but that's called Will Over. And then from Eye of the Beholder, we have Dungeon 2, which is by Yuzo Koshiro, Yuji Yamada, and Hitoshi Sakimoto. again, to go to like the whole breadth of those, that there's like such a different sound in so many of them. Like you had sort of like funky disco beats in some of them, and like like the Toho games, really focusing on those high end arpeggios.
Mhm.
It's like there's a real sort of, you can do a lot with that system, or with those sound chips.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
That's exactly right. There's just such a almost overwhelming amount of variety that you can get at with the sounds, like especially compared to like something like on the NES.
Mm. And like Koshiro, again, just like really just killing it with all of those ones. The scheme as well. I was looking at that as, there's a couple of different versions. So there's an OPN version and an OPNA version. My understanding is the OPN and the OPNA are just two different versions of that same sound chip. Is that right?
Uh, not quite. It's they're kind of,
Okay.
so the OPN is sort of based. That's the one that's used in the soundboard one, the FM soundboard one, and it was
Mm.
an earlier chip. That's the one I was mentioning earlier. It's a little less capable. It's got 3 voices instead of 6.
Oh, okay.
So the OPN-A is the newer one. That's the one that got Mr. Koshiro all excited to go out and do what he's doing here and wilding out.
Oh, okay, that makes a bit more sense. Yeah.
It's a
Um,
little weird with the nomenclature, right? So there's like a chip number, right? I think it's YM2203 or something, and then the other
2203, I
one is
think, is
the
those. Yeah.
2608. And
Yeah.
those are part numbers for the actual chip that you might put into a circuit. And then
Yeah.
OPN and OPNA refer to like a standard by Yamaha, I think.
Yeah. That was my understanding. Yeah.
But in
Um,
general, the YM2203 uses the OPN standard and the 2608 uses the OPNA standard.
yeah. Okay. So
And then to
that
make it
makes a
even
bit
more
more sense.
confusing, those chips go onto pieces of like larger pieces of hardware, the FM soundboard 1 and 2 respectively, right?
Yeah. Because yeah, even like the later versions that we're going to come up with some of them later on the PC, like the IBM PCs. They're all Yamaha stuff as well, but they're also ad-lib. So I
It's kind
guess
of the same deal, right? So AdLib,
yeah,
Sound Blaster, all that, those are like your FM soundboard type pieces of hardware,
yeah,
right? They're the big circuit boards. And
but they're
then the
just using
chips
that
are
chip
have
to,
their part numbers, and then they're what, OPL 1, 2, and 3 or something.
I believe, yeah, OPL2, I think, is pretty much everything is either OPL2 or 3 on the list that I have later. But yeah, and again, they're all sort of Yamaha chips. I think pretty much everything is on a Yamaha chip that we're talking about today. So I don't know if anyone else is manufacturing them.
Not in this
Um,
era. Like actually,
yeah.
Yamaha had a trademark and a copyright, and a patent. That's the word. Sorry, they had a patent on the FM technology, so nobody else made it until that patent expired sometime in the mid '90s.
Okay. And like there was FM synth was something you could buy, like a synthesizer that you could just play rather than having to program
Oh yeah,
that, right?
that was
Yeah.
the original intent, was
Yeah.
to put it in professional synthesizers. There was a very famous synthesizer called the Yamaha DX7.
Yes,
The
that's
sound of
yeah.
that is all over pop records of the mid to late '80s.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if that was the one that I was thinking of. Yeah. Um yeah, because like it's just so fascinating that like there's these two branches of the FM synth where it's like, yeah, the DX7, which again, like, as you say, is all over 80s and 90s music.
Oh yeah.
um and like and then just having the same or similar chips be all over video game music that was sort of contemporaneous as well is kind of is pretty wild.
I think for the professional sense, it's not. I mean, they are more capable than the video game chips, obviously,
Hmm.
but it's not so much about that. It's more that they're in recordings with other stuff that isn't FM synth, and I feel
Yeah.
like that sort of flatters the FM synths more, right?
Yeah.
Just like if you can combine it with some real drums or some vocals or something.
Yeah, obviously, like it's just part of a larger production, so you don't.
And then the FM synth is sort of a very charming addition to the whole thing instead of
Mm,
like the totality of what you're listening to.
yeah, but even so, like you can go online to like a bunch of like, especially if you listen to like city pop and stuff like that. Like Ryuichi Sakamoto, I believe, was one of the people that used it a lot, and like
Hmm.
um, it's in like I was just looking there. It's in Danger Zone.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's in Take on Me by Aha.
Oh, it's all over the
um,
place.
yeah, so like you can listen out for the and I think a lot of the time it was bass rather than anything else, but like it was a pretty popular synth bass as far as my understanding of how it was actually used
And
in songs.
I'd argue the piano, there was a very distinctive piano sound too. That was just all over everything.
Mm. Yeah,
Uh,
I can't think of the piano sound off the top of my head, but I'm sure once I hear it, I'd be like, oh yes, of course.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's very distinct. It had kind of like a bell-like quality to it. Very much an
Mm,
electric, like synthesized piano sound, but it was just especially like in ballads. It was in everything.
yeah. Go ahead, Ree. Sorry.
I was just curious, very, very laywoman question, but you mentioned Sound Blaster earlier. So would that be sort of like that as a sound card that's playing stuff like Doom? Does that have like an FM synth alongside sort of like other sort of like sample replication technology and eventually CD audio? What's something like that? How does that fit in?
You're pretty much spot on with what you said. Like there's a there it's a piece of electronics, right, on a circuit board, and it has a lot of components. One of those components is a chip that is an FM synthesizer from Yamaha, but it also has digital to analog converters, also
Mm,
analog to digital converters, and amplifiers for a microphone, stuff like that, right? It's got interface to the rest of the computer, a lot of other stuff. But
yeah.
you're basically right. It's a sound card, the way we still understand a sound card, and then it was back when
Mm,
they came on cards.
yeah. And I suppose
So would
to
the synth on the chip that was on a particular version of um Sound Blaster or Ad Lib, would that sort of change the tone of the music you were getting?
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like the answer is yes, but I'm just kind of trying to get a robust understanding for myself.
Oh yeah, yeah. There could be quite a variety of capabilities. Like I mentioned OPL earlier. I think some of the very oldest sound blasters had an OPL one, and then OPL two, like you mentioned earlier, was common for a while in the '80s, and OPL three became common in the like 1990-ish or 1991. The capabilities could vary quite greatly, kind of like the difference between the FM soundboard 1 and 2 that I mentioned earlier. A lot of times the sound blasters get kind of a bad rep for their FM synthesis, and a
Hmm.
lot of that is due to backwards compatibility. They'd usually try to write a lot of times they would write their soundtracks to kind of work with the oldest stuff.
Sure.
So that, to make sure that everybody, nobody was being left out. And not only that, but as with the newer stuff, it also got more complicated. And as I mentioned earlier, it's sort of a barrier to entry when it comes to doing stuff for a lot of people.
Cool,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I suppose to follow up from that, then how do those sound cards differ from something like a sound canvas or an Edirol?
Oh, so I mean, those are so a sound canvas or an Edirol, that's like actually like a those are desktop modules, right? Those are like
Yeah,
standalone synthesizers in a big box,
yeah.
that you'd plug a keyboard into or a computer and write music for it. Those are specialty pieces of hardware that only do MIDI. Basically,
Oh, okay.
they only do synthesizers. Kind of like Reese was saying earlier, though, with the sound blasters, they have to do microphone amplification. They got to do sound line, line in, line out. They got to
Hmm.
amplify speakers, and you know
Yeah,
they're
because I love how those sound, but I was always curious how they sort of play into like how they are different from like a sound card or something like that.
So, as a synthesizer too, you're comparing something that, that is meant to play video games basically to something that's a professional music tool,
Mm,
right?
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also
Um,
kind of different kinds of technology too. The sound canvases are sample-based synthesizers. So they're sort of like beefed up versions of what's on the Super Nintendo in a way, where they use
mm.
recordings. Uh, and then with FM synths, as I was saying, you kind of use very simple sounds and try to combine them in novel ways.
That makes sense with what you were talking to about the backwards compatibility on the Sound Blaster. Or I imagine you're making a sound card and your testing is a bit more like, okay, Wolfenstein has to sound great, Commander Keen has to sound great. While with the Sound Canvasser, you're probably doing like sample compositions or doing Enter Sandman or something. I don't know what the appropriate era song would be and see how that sounds.
It's kind of funny you bring up the sound canvas. A lot of people who wrote music for games back then actually wrote their music on a sound canvas when they're writing it, and then they kind of poured it to the hardware later. That was very
Mm.
common back then. I think Bobby Prince, who wrote I think all the soundtracks you just mentioned, I think famously did that.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, we're the next two blocks. Then we've got sort of stuff that works on the YM2413 in concert with like a PSG chip as well. Um, so like I think this is something that you had as well, where like you had systems that could handle their sort of their standard PSG sound. Um, and you could get like a music like add-on or module for it that could then sort of increase the complexity of the music by basically just adding some extra channels of FM synth. Um, so one of these that I discovered digging through the VGM Rips website once was the MSX port of Final Fantasy, and before I joined the chat, the two of you were talking about how unoptimized that port is. Because of the amount of loading time that you have to go through,
It's
Yeah.
but I
unplayable, dude.
but I absolutely love the soundtrack with the FM synth on it. Yeah, I sort of it was one of the things that when I was putting together this episode, this was sort of one of the things that inspired it, because I was just like, I really need to figure out a way to talk about the fact that there's an MSX port of the first Final Fantasy game, and the fact that I kind of like the soundtrack for this version more than the original.
Well, let's listen to it and we'll be the
Yeah.
judge.
Yeah, so that yeah, with the MSX, I don't know. Did either of you have one or play one when you were younger? I never
No.
saw
I did
one at
not
all.
know.
No.
I
Um,
vaguely understood the MSX as the place where Metal Gear once lived, and that's
yeah,
it. That's it.
yeah, that was pretty much my only experience with the
Like
MSX.
I emulated quite a bit of it later on, just kind of out of curiosity. Like, man, the original version of like I don't know if it's the original. There's a version of Contra on the MSX that's fascinating. It
Yeah,
doesn't have scrolling. It goes screen by screen.
yeah.
And probably my favorite part about that is that you get to the end like normal and you beat the alien heart, and then you have to go backwards. You go backwards through all the levels.
Oh, interesting.
It's so wild.
Yeah, that's a very sort of 80s video game move to be like. What's the other game I was thinking of that does that? Oh, Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah.
I don't think you go backwards through it, but you do have to just sort of replay the game a second time to actually get the real ending. Um, but yeah, no, that's a very Konami thing to do.
But it's so different than the NES version.
Yeah. So yeah, the MSX version of Final Fantasy, the composition, or sorry, the arrangements were done by Tadahiro Nitta. So what I've done is I've just got the PSG alone as the first track for each of these, and then the with the sound module added in then for the second track. So I have Underwater Temple, Battle, and Chaos Temple. and then just 2 tracks from the MSX version of Dragon Slayer: Legend of Heroes by Mieko Ishikawa, and those that's just called Field. So we'll jump into those and just sort of have a listen and compare and contrast the two.
And like that lead is a PSG too. It's
Mm,
funny how much the other FM stuff just flatters the PSG stuff, isn't it?
yeah. Um, yeah, I was going to just say actually there as you mentioned, like the simplicity of those tracks. Um, like, and you were saying that the YM2413, which is the MSX music module, is quite simplistic by comparison to other FM synth chips, but like in combination with the PSG, it adds such a richness to it. Like, just when you're comparing the much more basic stuff of like of the PSG sounds, and then just those the richness those FM synths add to it. It's just, yeah, it's really, really, really gorgeous to listen to. And as I say, the PSG on its own is sort of nothing to write home about. They're sort of competent, but then like you add in these like it's what, like 3 extra channels or something, is it? I'm not even sure it's 3, but like whatever it adds in, like it just gives it such a warmth and a richness to it that just sort of really pushes it over the edge.
I think you're right. I think it is 3, and I think I was mentioning this, earlier off the off air, but, even out of those 3, what's interesting about this implementation is only one of them is actually customizable, and they give you a selection of presets for the other 2, but they are at least good presets.
Yeah. So when you say presets, it's just like you can't customize the sound that it makes, or is it just that it's
Right,
like,
'cause I've alluded a few times that there's a lot you can do with FM, right?
yeah,
So, everything's based on sort of what they call operators, and an operator is kind of a sine wave sound source combined with an envelope generator, basically.
mm,
Meaning that you can, like, fade it in, or you can have it, you can do that kind of stuff, right?
yeah,
Uh,
You can
and
make the Zelda 2 sound.
right. And you can, so basically you can modulate one sound with another, and you can do this in many different combinations. And so the long and short of it is, with this MSX music, they kind of took a lot of those tools away, and they said, like, instead you have these presets, which does
yeah.
it, somebody else designed them and you can't change them, right?
But they're like presets. One will be like a piano preset. One will be like a bell preset. The other will be,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think they're usable presets.
yeah.
uh on top of that, the chip itself is generally one of the least capable. Each voice only can use 2 operators, and I'd say, the PC88 stuff that we heard earlier, even the older stuff with the FM Soundboard 1, they all had 4 operators per voice. That allows you to make much more sophisticated sounds.
And I suppose, is that similar to like patches on a synthesizer, like
Oh, presets,
on a
yeah,
professional?
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. It's sort of that same basic idea.
I'm curious. It's a leading question. Why does the FM synth attract a electrical engineer type more so than some of this other audio stuff that we discuss? Like, obviously I can infer a little bit, but like, it
Sister, it's
seems.
so nerdy.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm saying is like it's so nerdy, and it sounds like there's like this degree of customization you can engage in
And you
that.
you almost, I hate to say this because it sounds kind of arrogant, you almost need a degree in engineering to understand.
I think anybody who likes to mess around with with not just FM synth, but like analog synths in general, you do have to have that sort of engineering brain, because so much of it does, like, when you really break it down, is like you have to know how
Right.
sound works.
Well, just imagine that you're somebody trying to design sounds, right? You have to know, so you have something with a bunch of knobs and controls on it. You have to have some idea what it's going to do to the sound, right? For that to even work. Like, that makes sense on a basic level. uh, like with FM, wrapping your head around that can be kind of complicated, because just to kind of drop it on the floor. In general, when you modulate one sound with another, it has an effect of spreading spectrum. So you take harmonic spectrum and you create extra sidebands that are closely spaced, and I'm sure I've already lost everybody in the audience. But that's scientifically perfectly what happens, but what does it sound like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember you posted you've posted some of your projects where it's just like, oh, this classic JRPG with different. I don't think it's not a different sound font, but you've manipulated it to sound. We're playing the same song in a different way, but similar to the Final Fantasy soundtrack that we heard
Yeah.
just now, and it seems like there's a I don't want to say it's not a spectrum, but there is certainly sort of different vibes with the way I think audio people approach this, because I definitely know a lot of musicians that like creating their own sounds, that are very interested in the concept and structure of music, but do not approach it like an engineer at all. They either like purchase these modules that they plug into their whole setup to see how it sounds, or it's sort of like what they could create more diegetically. And then there's the people who are just like in the mad scientist lab trying to create the perfect sine wave so that boops just right.
You're not wrong, because I do meet musicians that do design their own sounds, can't describe the science behind it, but somehow have this savantness to it where they can feel out what the controls do, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like that you were saying. There's the science to it and there's the art to it, and you can come at it from either angle if you're willing to put in the work.
Right. And I think too, a lot of times with FM synth, you can do things additively. And what I mean is you can take like different pieces of different things and kind of add them together, right? So like a good example is like a lot of these basses that we hear, like these hard hitting FM basses, they have sort of a crunchy attack, and then they kind of decay to something a little simpler, right? And that's part of what makes them go so hard. So you can, if you really look at the settings for some of these bass patches, like you can kind of separate those two parts. That is kind of what I'm getting at. I feel like some of these musicians, some of these savant guys, maybe they're good at doing that. They may not necessarily understand why those particular controls create that crunchy attack, but they can kind of take that piece of it and put it on something else. And you see what I'm kind of getting at?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so I think we're just going to jump into the next block of tracks because it's just a very short one. So these, similar to the MSX music, in Japan, the Master System or the Mark III had the PSG as by default, but also had like an FM synth module and same chip by the looks of it as the YM2413. We discussed it briefly in the Phantasy Star Classic episode with Gary a few months back at this stage, but I had put this playlist together actually before Gary said he would do these. So yeah, I think there's actually a repeat here on these ones, but that's fine. Just because again we're just going to show the comparison between like the PSG version on its own and then with the FM synth module. So tracks by Tokuhiko Uwabo. I have Dungeon 2 PSG and FM version, and then I have Lassic PSG and FM version. Nice. Yeah, again, like just it's fun to hear the contrast between the PSG versions, which, as you mentioned during the break, uh, if you played this outside of that was the only version you could have ever heard, because the FM Synth module was never actually released outside of Japan. But it's it does just sort of add such a nice richness to it. It's a very good to a classic soundtrack, but then you just sort of get these nice extra little flourishes to it that you don't always get.
Yeah, it sounds great.
It just really opens up the possibilities. It makes it very obvious when you play them back to back like that.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, we sort of talked a bit about sound blasters and stuff like that in the previously, but I think we're gonna have a bit more chat about them because the next block is all PC stuff, like IBM PCs, I should say, rather than Japanese PCs. And like this is like they're all like ad libs, sound blasters, OPL3, OPL2. Got a bunch of different stuff, but something that I always remember, because I never had a PC until we got a Windows 95 PC, and like multimedia PCs, I think it's sort of passed for discrete sound cards unless you were a huge nerd. But like I think by that point they'd all sort of had their own built-in sound cards. But one thing I always remember is if you did play a DOS game, a lot of the times as part of the sequence it would sort of ask you what sound cards you were using, and this was something that baffled me as a child because I'd be like, why does it matter what sounds? You know, most of the time I would just pick the first option. But I remember like you'd have to set like bus addresses and IRQ.
Oh yeah.
And all this
Yeah,
stuff.
you had to do it. You had to do DMAs and stuff, right? You almost had to be a little bit of an engineer to even get the stuff set up.
Yeah, so and I remember just being like absolutely baffled by that. But most of the time, like your built-in sound cards that were in that was in my Packard Bell that we got, say for with Windows 95 in it, like just whatever the default settings usually worked fine. But it was something that occasionally you did have to find a very specific setting for sounds before it would actually play anything for you.
Oh yeah, I remember there for a little while it was getting dicey for like some of these mid-90s DOS games were starting to, because DOS as an operating system had like some weird memory limitations. You had to start playing some very weird games to get around some of those things. It was a weird time for playing games on a computer.
Yeah. And one thing I do remember as well is just messing around with the little MIDI thing. The software MIDI thing in Windows always fascinating as well. It was this little software program that sort of tried to represent a hi-fi stack. And I used to love that, just clicking into it, clicking on and off the little hi-fi elements. Like,
what kind of synth was baked into that thing? What was it? Do you remember? Was it an FM synth?
I don't remember at all. No, it was just like to my knowledge, it was just a generic thing, but it was like these really early sort of multimedia that were they were sold with speakers built into them, and they like you got your Weezer video in the Windows 95 files that you could play and stuff like that. But yeah, as I say, going back to the DOS games, then you just sort of you'd have to deal with this because, like, I think by then, like you'd have your CD drivers built in, so a lot of the games that you'd play would come with Redbook audio, even if sometimes the Redbook audio was just a recording of an FM synth. But yeah, so yeah, we'd got a sort of a mix of games. The ones that you actually specifically called out to me ages back were Tyrion and Cybersphere as sort of being among the better sort of the better usage of FM synth on IBM PCs. So I don't know if you could sort of talk about those soundtracks a little bit.
Absolutely. Always happy to talk about Tyrion a little bit more too. because just as a type of game, it's what's known as a Euro shmup. So
Yeah.
so you see, this was a stealthy way to make this another shmups episode. It's funny too. The term Euro shmup is sort of a pejorative originally, but it's kind of a
Yeah.
term of endearment now.
Yeah.
But
Especially because you don't really see them as much anymore.
that's true. I also do want to stop and shout out Jets and Guns, a game you can buy on Steam, a fantastic, more modern Euro shmup in the vein of a Tyrion 2000. I
Yeah.
very highly recommend it. A lot
Great
of fun.
soundtrack on that as well.
It's funny too, because people who like Euro shmups and people who like bullet hell shmups, the conceit is that we hate each other, but I'm the rare guy that loves them both.
I'm really excited to listen to these soundtracks. My number one reaction is I'm looking at the game Cybersphere, and my only thought is we used to name video games awesome things.
I know.
We don't do that anymore. Cybersphere is the coolest fucking name from 1992 or whenever this was released.
And you would never guess the kind of game it is from the name, but like it sounds cool as hell.
No, it's an Arkanoid clone.
Oh, you know I might guess it was an Arkanoid clone.
It's a very competent Arkanoid clone, but man, that soundtrack has no business going as hard as it does.
Authored by Clay Hellman. I'm excited for this across the board.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just one of the best examples, maybe the best example of, like, also one of the highest end FM chips that was put out there. So it's a OP, in this case OPL3, capable of 6, well, it's funny what it can do. You can do like 12 channels of 2 operator FM, or you can do 6 channels of 4 operator FM. You've got options. So, and you can kind of mix and match to some degree. So you can have less sophisticated FM combined with more, in like larger arrangements. Not only that, but like the operators themselves can do more than sine waves, and so they can have a very distinctive tone compared to a lot of the other FM synths out there. Just a lot of capability that almost nobody used.
Yeah.
But you're right, the Cybersphere soundtrack is one of the
really
few
good.
that really makes use of it.
Yeah. No, again, when you recommended it to me, I was like, yeah, we'll definitely have to include these. The other 2 tracks I've thrown in are from Korean PC ports of Falcom games. They were Korea exclusive, I believe. In one of the previous episodes on Ease, I think I included the Ease 2 port. But those are done by SoundTeMP, who are sort of more famous now for like Korean MMOs, I would say, than anything else. But they're still around to this day. I have quite a few of their soundtracks for is it Lineage 2? Is that the name of the Korean MMO? And then they're like called Granado Espada. But like all Korean MMOs, the grind gets too heavy towards towards the mid game. So just none of these games are games I've been able to play for very long. But the music is always really, really. But like, yeah, say back as far as the 90s, these guys were sort of doing really good arrangements of Japanese games.
I don't know about you guys. I could listen and have listened to countless different arrangements of the music from Ease. I just love that soundtrack.
Yeah, like
for the rest of my life. Yeah,
we could do a podcast, just like a whole podcast as long as this one has been going on, just on different versions of games. Like there's so much going on, like, and like between official stuff and unofficial stuff, it's just like, yeah, there's such a massive depth of different things to go through.
And you see what you've done here, right? You've added a track from Ease 2 in here, and sure, it's on another platform. It's being arranged by somebody else, but you snuck Yuzo Koshiro back in here again.
I did indeed. Yeah, can't avoid him.
Every opportunity. That's the number one mandate of the pod.
I do love an excuse to put more Yuzo Koshiro in the pod. Yeah. So yeah, we'll jump into this block of tracks anyway. So The first track is Mieko Ishikawa, arranged by SoundTeMP, and this is from the PC version of Legend of or Dragon Slayer Legend of Heroes again. So this is Field, which we heard earlier. So again, for comparison, you'll get a nice little different version of it. Then we have Ice Ridge of Noltia, which is arranged by SoundTeMP, originally composed by Yuzo Koshiro. And then from the Tyrian soundtrack, composed by Alexander Brandon and Andreas Molnar, we have Asteroid Dance Part 2, Deli Shop Quartet, and Gryphons of the West. Then from the Cybersphere soundtrack, composed by Clay Hellman, we have Bonus Level BGM 2, Options Level Complete, and Sector Selection.
I was just saying offline that it goes so hard, that soundtrack, for an Arkanoid clone. Like, can you like, I wanna say, can you imagine that coming out of a DOS game? But it did.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. Like, and we were talking as well about how, like, compared to some of the other stuff, like, it really does sound like so much more professional, like an actual professional synth, like something you'd hear in a song that you might hear on the radio rather than than anything else. And yeah, it's real good. Which is to say nothing that that the YM3812, which is the OPL2, which everything else in the block was, like also absolutely fantastic. But yeah, you were talking about the sort of the increased complexity of the OPL3, just sort of really give people the opportunity to do a lot more, and like just like the way the synths sound in that last soundtrack, just compared to other stuff, is much more complex. Like
Yeah, it's kinda
the
like night and day,
distortions
isn't
on
it?
it. Yeah, it's really cool. Like some like the sort of like sweeps and stuff like that went that just sort of gave it a lot of texture that isn't in the previous. You didn't get a lot in the other ones. But I think our last block is going to be possibly the most well-known FM synth, which is the one that's included in the Mega Drive.
That's right, the old
Yeah,
YM2612.
yeah.
Hell
If
yeah.
you know FM synth, you probably know it from this system.
In the wild, it's the one most audio freaks have been obsessed with in my life.
I think it's just
I
so
know somebody
nostalgic and iconic.
who got like
Mm.
a DIY project that like uses that chip in like a digital, like a custom digital player that you would kind of have to put together.
Oh
So it
yeah,
was playing, so you could play the Mega Drive songs directly from the chip, sort of like casually like that. And and it's the sort of thing that sounds amazing to me, but you need to be such a specific kind of nerd to even be like, why would you want that?
I feel too that when people do, like, chiptune, like, that is
Mhm.
almost the default chiptune in a sense.
Certainly one of the big ones, especially like the coolest one, I would say. Like there's something about the crunchiness to it that really appeals across the board.
It's funny you say that. Capabilities-wise, it's very similar to what was in the FM soundboard 2 on the PC-88, actually. In fact, even the chip, it's a YM2612. The one in the FM soundboard 2 is a 2608. So even the number, even the chip number's close, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
Technically, I think the 12 is a cut. It's supposed to be a budget version or something of the one in the FM soundboard. Uh, it's kind of it's kind of funny too. The one in the the 2608 in the FM soundboard has some PSGs that are baked in, and those are gone in this one. And it's but you don't miss it because one of the things Sega did with with the Genesis is they have the entire Sega Master System basically in there too, right? Which has its own 3 PSGs, so you
yeah.
can get them that way. So the Genesis still does PSGs, it's just not part of that chip.
Oh, okay, interesting. So I can still access the PSG. Just
Yeah, basically you get them through like the Master System compatibility. Exactly.
okay, interesting. I'm trying to. Oh yeah, the what was the Castlevania game on the GBA that did something like that as well? It's Harmony of Dissonance, where it rather than using the GBA sound hardware, it accessed the Game Boy chip to do its sound. And a lot of people
Oh,
hated it at the time, but I've come around to that now as being a soundtrack.
interesting. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
I
gonna
kind of
check that
liked
and
out
it.
after this.
yeah, and the Game Boy. I suppose the Game Boy itself is the other example of the sort of the thing that you think of when you think of chiptunes. Um,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
yeah, people modding their Game Boys to connect them to computers to use them as a synthesizer, essentially.
My partner has worked with that a little bit, and it's
Okay.
just extremely cool in general, just the fact that there is some kind of like support for that, like little like Game Boy trackers and stuff, and just hearing the noises that come out of it. Oh, Italian chef's kiss.
So oddly enough, they did add something to the 2612 that was lacking. They added a digital to analog converter, which is how you can do like samples and stuff like that. Well, it's not just that; it's how you get any sound at all out of it. But on the FM soundboard, they had like a whole separate chip that did that. But on the 2612, it's baked in, and it's kind of that kind of plays to it being a budget product in a way, and also the one that's baked in is a little it's rougher. So people often know the Genesis has kind of a grainy sound to it. I think that's key to why that is compared to like what you hear from like the PC-88.
Okay, interesting.
It kind of because it has that kind of baked in, somewhat lower quality DAC. What's even funnier is earlier, the first revision of it actually had like like an actual bug. Like there was an actual like not even a bug because that sounds like it's software. It's like a hardware design flaw that caused it to sound like kind of fuzzy when sounds were really quiet. And some games even made use of that on purpose to do like weird distortion effects. But
Okay.
it got kind of weird because like in like the later revisions of the Genesis, they replaced it. They actually replaced the chip with an ASIC core that actually fixed the design flaw. But now it means that some of the older games that did it on purpose don't sound right.
Oh, okay. I was going to bring that up actually because my understanding was there was a couple of different hardware revisions that did give trouble to certain old games or older games that. So because I always found that really that what's the Brian Eno thing of the thing we miss from any technology is its limitations as soon as it's gone.
Yes, the best quote ever, as I like to call it.
Famously, the 2612 also includes the ability to play PCM. It's like recorded samples. Almost every Genesis game that you've ever played uses that for its drum sounds.
Okay.
But there's not much, and you have to sacrifice a channel. So, like the other chip, you have 6 voices of FM, and you have to sack one to get samples.
Okay.
So then you have 5 voices of FM, and you have samples, basically, right?
Okay.
And not only that, but there's not much support in the hardware for it, so you end up having to do a lot with the software. So if you went overboard, it could actually slow the game down quite a bit.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so that's why they don't they're kind of careful about using it. Like if you listen carefully to drum tracks in Genesis games, a lot of times there's just one playing at a time. So you'll get things like crash cymbals that just abruptly cut out so that they can do something else.
Oh, okay. Right. I think we'll jump into the last block of tracks then. So the first track we have is from Mega Man Wily War, Wily Stage 1. The arrangement is by Takashi Tateishi. This is one I included not because it's a particularly good version of Wily Stage 1, but just to sort of show that sometimes for as good as this sound chip could be, there were some dodgy sort of translations from Super Nintendo or Nintendo tracks at times.
I love that you're negging the sound chip.
Well, it's not the sound chip here. It's just like just a little bit of whoever translated sort of didn't.
No, you don't have to do. No, I get it. You do one bad song, so the next 4 sound amazing. I know how it works.
Yeah. And it's not even bad. It's still Wily Stage 1 at the end of the day. It's just not the best version of it. So I've got from Mad Stalker Full Metal Fourth by Keiichi Onao is On Tactics. Then from Advanced Buster Hawk Glay Lancer by Noriyuki Iwadare Masanori Isao Mizoguchi, Yoshiaki Kubatera is Asteroid Field. Then from Devil Crash, I have Main Table by Toshiaki Sakoda. Then I have from Echo the Tides of Time, Two Tides by Attila Dobos, Andreas, Magyari, and Andy Armour.
This episode has been the most in depth and truly just a beautiful exploration of the divine tones that will play in heaven. Once I'm obliterated by a Cybertruck, I'm gonna hear that Echo song, that Glay Lancer song. Pizza Hut will taste just like it did when I was a kid. I'll be able to drink Cokes like when I was a kid with no worry about my teeth or my weight. And it's just gonna be nonstop FM synth. It's beautiful. It's great.
Hell yeah,
uh,
man.
that Ley Lancer soundtrack is so good. Like,
You have no idea
that's
how activated I am right now after listening to that Glay Lancer song. I'm just like, what? Why is it called that? I don't know. It doesn't matter. The song banged hard enough that it gets to be a word now.
It's just such a great Sega Genesis ass soundtrack, you know?
Yeah.
It just plays to all those strengths.
Same with the with Devil Crash, like, and again, like it's a pinball game. It doesn't need to go that hard, but fuck it, they're gonna do it.
As I was saying offline, I was more familiar with the PC Engine version of that game and its soundtrack, and man, it's just so with FM Synth, it's just so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. The Mad Stalker as well is a very cool sort of side-scrolling sort of robot beat 'em up looking thing. Never played it, but one I've seen videos of, and I mean, like, I should get around to playing it because it's a very 90s ass video game. Where you just got, like, you just go around in a mech and do Street Fighter moves at other mechs basically. And the music just absolutely whips.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what you do with mechs in real life. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, that's FM Synth for you. I covered a nice spread of everything that the FM Synth can do. So thank you so much for joining us again, Justin. Have you any final FM Synth or the Genesis or anything else we discussed?
Oh, countless, but I really shouldn't.
Fair enough. Yeah, if you want to plug anything or any projects you got going on at the moment, let people know where they can find you online and so forth. Let us know.
So I won't plug myself necessarily, except tangentially. I will plug for anybody out there that happens to be interested in weird guitars. My friend Danny Scarborough has made a very weird guitar called the Resolute, and I am involved with a follow-up project to design a digital synthesizer for that.
Interesting.
The original Resolute is actually a square wave generator synthesizer attached to basically a guitar-like interface. Lots of fun to play. If you're into weird guitars, I highly recommend looking it up.
That looks neat.
Cool.
Yeah. That's a really interesting. Very cool. Yeah, no, I'll put a link to that in for sure.
Other than that, I will just follow up to say that in preparing for this episode, I did put together a Google Doc with some of my thoughts about the technical aspects of FM Synth.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like this was the right venue to probably go that much detailed into it, but for people who join our Discord, I will make that available for people to look through if you want.
Okay, yeah.
I can definitely just put that in the show notes as well for people because it's a good read as a primer.
It's a good read. It was revelatory to read that and then hear the Zelda 2 noise as played for me by Justice.
Yeah. Reese, anything you want to plug at the moment, or
check out Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth. Check out Existential Warfare. I am finally, after a whole fucking thing, my move is winding down. So hopefully there will be more of all that, more Reese than you could ever possibly handle.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Absolutely, and we've
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, as for ourselves, we can be found at Patreon CRT Sound System if you want to throw us a few bucks. You can get some bonus episodes. I still have another mini episode that I need to finish editing that we recorded a while ago.
Mhm.
I just need to get around to actually editing, but I've been lazy and then I went on holiday. Um,
Allowed,
and
all allowed.
yeah, come and join us in the Discord.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
hang out.
Justice sometimes will just post like the coolest thing you've ever seen in the
Aw,
Discord,
thanks,
so you should come
guys.
check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, anything else you can find our tree links to our social media and all that in show notes. So the last track we're going to go out with is another track from Brandish VT called Forbidden Power. Thanks, Reese. Thanks, Justice. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you,
Yep.
Tom. Thank you,
Oh, yeah.
listeners.
See you guys around.